Okay, let's try this again. So I recorded this video once, but apparently it wasn't recording, and I spoke for 30 minutes looking like a dumbass. So sorry about that. Okay, so this is the photography, the editing video got requested, and so I'm gonna use VSCO for today's edit. I might do others if y'all like this one. If not, I won't, because I feel like y'all don't want to hear my terrible voice. I might sound monotone or some shit like that. So, excuse any background noises I'm gonna have, because I'm in my room and you can hear my family in the background or the neighbors driving by and things like that. I do have music playing in the background because it helps me edit better, and I'm also gonna put probably the names of the songs that we're playing throughout the video and things like that. These are all on shuffle play, so it's not any specific that I know of that's playing. So to start off, you're gonna take your picture that you took. You can take it on iPhone. I'm taking it on a camera. Most of my pictures are on camera, but I don't condone like shooting on iPhone because I feel like if you have a good phone, then you can also take like really good images. But apart from that, let's open VSCO. So this is my VSCO profile. I have a lot of images on here that you may want to see that that I don't have on my Instagram. So to start off, you're gonna upload your image. So the image I decided to upload for y'all, I already edited, and so I have all my edits written down, and I didn't want y'all to see the image yet, and also I didn't want to go through like an actual process of me editing a picture because it takes a while, because my pictures, depending on what it is, one picture could take me like an hour or two, or it could take me like 10 to 15 minutes. So it depends on how I shot the picture and if I want to work with it more and things like that. So any image is not a bad image. Mostly all images are good. It's just all in your editing. So as a photographer, everything goes into your editing and on how you can perfect an image. So say you shot an image and it was like super underexposed or overexposed. Sometimes it's like really hard to work with. Well, it's going to be hard to work with, but it's not merely impossible. You might not get the same results as like how you saw it when you shot it, but you can get something similar. So start off, here's the image that I chose for y'all. Just gonna make sure it's still recording. Okay, so you click on your editing tool, and as you see, I'm a VSCO member, and so I pay $20 monthly and I get access to all their presets, which are all of these. And I also get access to certain tools that not any member gets access to, which I totally recommend. So this is sort of like a promotion for VSCO. You're welcome. But yeah, it's honestly worth it in my opinion. VSCO, that's where I do a lot of my editing. A lot of photographers might think, oh, it's like a mobile photography type of thing. It's like not good. I don't you should not do that. You're not a photographer if you do like mobile editing. But nowadays, photography is mostly driven through social media and the web, and so you need to have your images like available on the web quicker. And so if you like go through like this long process of what a photographer used to do like a long time ago, it's gonna take more time, and you need to, like, in terms of marketing and advertising, you need to get your images out there quick, but still good images. That way you can like please your audience. So all photographers are different, to be honest. So I do like real professional photography, but this is more of for like my Instagram and things like that, which is sort of my portfolio of my images that I have and the edits I do. And so I don't condone the use of presets, but presets is a way sort of like cheating per se, but I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, But if you're just like a person that takes pictures, you're not actually doing it for like a job or anything, then I don't see anything wrong with it. But presets is just a way of like it adjusts the tools for you, like so you don't have to take a long time in editing. And so I use presets sometimes, but I really try not to, because as I said, as a photographer, like you're supposed to like create your own work, not just like rely on others. But it is a helpful tool, especially like VSCO. It gives you access to these presets that are mostly like film effects. So like you can see on the bottom, it tells you like the names of the film cameras that would produce a similar effect. And so for today's edit, I did choose AL2. So this is a new series that they recently released, and it's more for artificial light, what AL stands for. And so they have artificial light for LED lights, and then for fluorescent lights, and for mixed lights, which is if you have both LED and fluorescent lights in your image, it controls both of them at the same time. So for this one, I chose AL2. They also have LED boost and LED soften, and then fluorescent soften and fluorescent boost. It's just if you want to boost the brightness or how strong that light in your image is, or if you just want to soften it, like to decrease it so it's not as strong. So also, I don't recommend like keeping it all the way, like just clicking on a preset and then just like, oh yeah, that's good. Like you have to work with it. And so the more you put it to the right, I feel it's the more like the less work you have to do, and I feel like you should be able to put the work into it. And so I put mine around 10. And so I wrote these all down, so this is not necessarily how long it's going to take me to edit a video, but this is for y'all. That way y'all get a idea of how my editing goes. Not all my editing is the same. It depends on what I'm shooting. I'm not going to just use VSCO if I shoot a portrait. Like I run my pictures through multiple apps depending on what I'm shooting. So honestly, if I need like lens flares, I have different apps for lens flares. If I need like to remove like blurs and remove blemishes and things like that, do a lot of body corrections, adding things to images, Photoshop, and I use Lightroom for the lighting tools and things like that. So honestly, I can't like pinpoint what I use exactly for everything. So to start off, I try not to use the presets as I said, but I just use that one preset. But these are just the different tools that they have. I'm common to I know these tools well, but as a person that doesn't know these tools, I'm gonna try to run through them individually while I'm editing. That way you get an idea of what they do. So you have exposure, contrast, straighten, crop, X-skew, Y-skew, sharpen, clarity, saturation, highlights, shadows, temperature, tint, skin tone, vignette, grain, fade, shadows, tint, highlights, tint, borders, HSL. So to start off, I have exposure. You can obviously see the effects of exposure. Also, I have numbers written down like what I did on the previous edit, so you're not gonna don't necessarily follow these numbers. Like it's not an exact number you have to have. I go more of how the images looks like. And so for this one, I just had it around 2.1. And when you adjust an image, you find yourself like when you adjust one tool, you have to adjust another one and things like that. So let's say you like one image, how you adjusted it in your like down pack, you have it and you save it. You come back a week later and you see the same image and you don't like it anymore, or you feel like it could use this. So you're constantly tweaking things and of that matter. And so for the next one, we have contrast. Just making sure it's still editing. Okay. So for contrast, I have negative 0.9, around there. Going to straighten. For straighten, I recommend like if there's any lines in the image that you can sort of bounce it off of. So you can see the lines in the background and the wall, you can sort of try to get them to be parallel. to straighten your image, and this also does cut on the image to straighten it for you, so you are losing pixels in that, but the less pixels you lose, the better. And now to VSCO, which is this one. When you're shooting an image, I recommend, well, they recommend mostly photographers like to choose different angles, get creative angles, like from all the way above, from down below, from the side. Just finding how you can make an image look different. So for this one, you can see that the image is sort of falling backwards because I did just point it and shoot it. And so an image is more of just like doing a creative, how do I say it? Before taking an image, you want to know, like, in your mind, portray how you want it to come out, and then that's when you start shooting. But you don't just raise your camera and just shoot and then just like leave it like that. You have to think about it before you shoot. So VSCO, like, this is where I didn't actually worry about like shooting angles because I knew I was going to adjust this later in editing. And so VSCO, you can see if images fall backwards or forwards. And so I can put it around there. That way it looks like the image was really straight, even though I was taking it from lower angle. Also through VSCO, when you hold an image, you can see your original image and then your image with your edits. And you can just see your progress as you go. If you swipe left on the image, I think right, actually, it'll undo the edit that you just did. And if you swipe left, it'll go back. That way you can see the individual edit. That looks good. Okay. Going down the line, XQ. This is just the side view of it. And crop, adjusting depending on what type of file format, the size of the crop certain apps use. Going to sharpen. I have it at 0.5. I try not to use sharpen as much because if you're using sharpen and then you run it through other different apps, you're losing your image quality, and you're either adding more pixels or removing pixels, and that just adds to grain and noise. And so what I try to do mostly, if I feel like an image is blurry and I need to add sharpen, I try to do all the edits I need to do through different apps, and then when I'm putting on Instagram for a final product, that's when I'll add sharpen maybe on Instagram, but I really try not to because it doesn't look good. But it all depends on you as a person. We're not gonna all edit the same way. So clarity, I never use this because you can see how it looks like, and it adds just too much contrast in my opinion. Saturation, pretty self-explanatory, adding color, removing color, and this is for the colors overall in the image. Then you go to highlights. For highlights, I did use 9.2, and for highlights, it's like removing how strong the image brightness is, sort of. And so you can see if you go all the way to the right, the highlights compared to when it didn't have any highlights. So I had mine around 9.2. Okay, moving down to shadows. I didn't use shadows, but you can see it's supposed to remove the shadows in the image, and even though there's like a shadow right there and it didn't remove it. But I know VSCO isn't like, it's a really good app that I recommend, but it's not compared to like Photoshop and Lightroom where you're actually paying for a membership, because those will like literally remove the shadows. So I'm not saying don't use VSCO, but it's just a way, a cheaper way to do these edits. Moving down to temperature, you can see if you want a warmer image, if you want a cooler image. So for temperature, I had mine around 5.2. Moving down to tint. Tint is more if you want like a pinkish hue around your image, or you want a greener hue, and this all depends on what type of image you're shooting. So for tint, I went around -4.3. Skin tones, that's more of portraits, so you really won't see much of it, but it's just to for when you're shooting portraits. For vignette, you can see how it gets dark, but it's not technically contrast, because vignette is more of darkness around the borders, and it doesn't really mess with the original brightness of an image in the front, in the middle. So on Photoshop, it has like feather effects, so on different other shapes that you can use for vignette. And so here, for vignette, I use around 8.5. Moving down the line, you can see the effects of grain. And grain, I really try not to use it because you see how it looks like. It looks nasty. But there's people that like grain, so it just depends on who your audience is. As you move down, you have fade. So you can see fade, it's like a blur type of thing. I don't use fade at all. Moving down the line, we have shadows and highlights tints. So you can see the effects of these on the image, but I don't use those either. I just don't think I need them for my images. I might need them down the line, but I haven't used them for any of my images. Going down to borders, this is how it looks like. I think that looks really nice. Simple, clean, minimalist. But I put the vote up and y'all didn't want me to use borders on my images on Instagram, so I guess I'm not using them. But I do use borders for my VSCO profile. I think overall that should be most of the tools. There's also on VSCO receipts. So let's say you shot a wedding or something, and they were all mostly in the same lighting, like everything around the environment was about the same, so there wasn't different elements going on in the environment. Then you can like sort of a way to make it quicker. Let's say you shot 300 images, and you need to edit them real quick. So you can edit one image and then you save a receipt, and then that way you just go to the other images and then you apply that receipt. So it's more like a copy and paste type of thing. And so right here you can also see the different tools you have available. I mean the tools you actually used. And so you can click on them and then let them go to see just that one individual tool that you used. And so you can also organize your presets here on VSCO and organize your tools on which ones you want first, your receipts. So the last one I used was HSL. This is more of a Lightroom feature. And so VSCO had an interview with me about adding this feature, and I thought this was a great idea, and I was glad they added it because it's like super helpful. It's like a way of having that tool that's on Lightroom, which was not really expensive, but you're having a membership to pay for, and then it's mostly free if you already have a VSCO membership. So this is where you mess with your colors individually, like your reds, oranges, yellows, greens, blues, and purples / magenta. So these HSL stands for hue, saturation, and luminance. And this is basically playing with, it's you as a person, so you have to play with it individually. I'm not gonna say what your image needs this and needs that. It's more of what the picture you shot and what it needs. So for my HSL tools, I mess with all of them, and depending on the color that's also on the image. So the reds, you can see them if you go into detail. So I chose around 2.9. For saturation, I chose 1.3. And for luminance, I chose 2.3. I'm just seeing the reds, the differences. So for oranges, you can see like the hues is like if you want a darker orange, a lighter orange, sort of. I went to negative 1.4, around there. For saturation, I went to 6, and for luminance, I went to 3.3. Again, don't follow these numbers precisely because it's more on you messing with the tool and the slider to see what your image needs. So moving down to green, I went down to negative 2.5. For saturation, I went up to 4.4. And for luminance, I went up to 1.2. So just seeing the effects of that. Then for my blues, my hues, you can see the effect. So I felt like the image already had enough blue overall throughout the whole image. So your hues is more of just like how strong you want it to be. So I went down to negative 3.2. My saturation, I went down to negative 1.6, around there. And my luminance, I went down to negative 2.5. And so you can see the difference there. For my purples, I went down to negative 3.0. And I just didn't like that the purple shows up right there on the white part. And so that's why I went down that low. For my saturations, I went down to negative 5.1. And you can see the effects of that. But I actually just want to go all the way down. That way you don't see any purple, or try not to. For luminance, I went up to 2.2, around that area. And so you can see the effects of before and after. And then you just want to tweak with it and mess with it. Now I just want to mess with the oranges because there's 2 different shades of oranges from the street sign and the art. So I think that's my final product. A lot of people might say, why do you have like this big bright spot in the middle? And I actually like it because I feel it shows the effect of the light that's hitting it. But also, if you don't like it, those are things you can like take through Photoshop and remove them. Also, like this light streak that's just coming down, you can remove that. But for me, I think it's okay. But that's also me because I'm hard on myself, so I don't honestly, all my images, I feel like they can use constant tweaking. Like this exposure, I might want to take it down now. And then I feel like this highlight needs to come back up around there. Okay, I think that's good. So those are my images, and my edits, sorry. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll probably put another vote up some other time if I have another image I might want to edit. I might want to do portraits and things like that and show y'all. But I'm gonna put a vote to see if y'all want to hear that or y'all just don't want to hear me speaking again. But thank you for listening, and yeah.